Welcome back to the Kyle Lanzalone show. We have another special broadcast today. The bombs keep falling. Iran is retaliating against Israel. And so, just like yesterday, I wanted to come on, do an end of the day recap. Again, just like yesterday, there's so much misinformation going on out there. If you watch the mainstream media, you get so much Israeli propaganda. And so, I want to take some time, maybe like a half hour here, just kind of break down what's unfolded today, where I think this might be going, hammer out a lot of important details, and where there's a lot of people being misled and trying to distort the narrative here. So just do me a favor and share this show out. We are live, and so hitting the repost button right now on X would, of course, help us out. If you're watching live and you want to interact, drop us some comments, head on over to the YouTube channel, subscribe, and then do that. Not only will that help us grow the show in the future, but again, you can interact tonight, maybe bring up some questions, speculations, rumors that you've heard, and I could try to address some of those. So I want to jump right into it. I've been busy writing today, mostly at antiwar.com, but also for the Libertarian Institute. And I want to start off with this, probably the most important article I wrote today. Trump praises excellent Israeli strikes on Iran. And what I explained in that article is that speaking with NBC News on the phone following the Israeli strikes across the Islamic Republic, Trump said, "I think it's been excellent. We gave them a chance and they didn't take it. They got hit hard, very hard. They hit about as hard as you're going to get hit, and there's more to come, a lot more." Now, Trump refused to provide details about the U.S. role in the attack, saying, "I don't want to comment on that." However, a source provided further details of the U.S. support, telling ABC News that Washington provided Tel Aviv with exquisite intelligence. Additionally, the source said the U.S. will help defend Israel against any Iranian response. And of course, we have seen that unfold during the day. But just to get into it and break this part of the story down a little bit, here you have Trump giving an endorsement, saying the attack was a good thing. And this is, I believe, highly problematic. If Iran, and Iran, at time and time again in the past, we've seen Tehran be very careful how they respond to Western provocations, even direct, Western attacks on Iran or high-ranking Iranian officials, like the killing of General Qasem Soleimani. They didn't recklessly lash out at the United States of America, drop bombs that killed American soldiers. No, they telegraphed that attack. They made sure. Yes, they did something that they had never done before. They attacked a base in Iraq that housed American soldiers, but they telegraphed it enough to allow the Americans to get in their bunkers. They hit portions of the base where the Americans wouldn't be hiding, and to guarantee that they didn't kill any Americans. Even after Israel destroyed an Iranian consulate building in Syria, effectively attacking an Iranian diplomat on Iranian soil, Iran only responded by, yes, they hit Israel, they dropped bombs, but they didn't hit major targets. They didn't attack Iran's like nuclear infrastructure, which is key. And so again, we see Iran giving responses. They are responding, but they're not responding in a way that's careless and reckless and meant to escalate the situation. What they're trying to do in their response is establish deterrence. And so if the Americans, because Marco Rubio issued it, sure, it was a lie, but a carefully calibrated statement last night saying that the U.S. didn't play any role in the attack. And coming out today, we are understanding that the U.S. did play a role in the attack, and we'll be talking about that throughout the day, or throughout this episode. And so just to, get into Trump calling this excellent, he is really giving an endorsement, which I think Tehran's going to see as more reason that they're going to not only have to give a bigger response, but also respond to the United States, not just to Israel. And so this is going to cause the war to expand the more provocative Trump is with his rhetoric. Now, Throughout the day, Trump has issued a variety of statements, both on his Truth Social and in some telephone calls with different reporters. I believe he spoke with Brock Ravid from Axios, somebody from CNN as well. And what he said is, well, the Iranians still have a chance to make a deal. Now, what he's really saying is that the Iranians have a chance to surrender, right? When Trump is talking about the Iranians have a chance to make a deal, if Trump wanted to make a deal with the Iranians, he would have told Israel not to attack Iran, and would they would have sat down together in Oman this weekend and hammered out a deal like planned. However, Trump really doesn't want a deal with Iran. He wants the Iranians to surrender. He wants the Iranians to absolutely capitulate to the American demands. He in no way wants to make a deal to negotiate with Iran. In fact, some of the targets that Israel hit were people who were on the negotiating team for Iran, were involved in the diplomatic process. And we've seen Israel do this time and time again. The Hamas official who negotiated the initial ceasefire and hostage exchange in November of 2023 was later killed by an Israeli airstrike in Beirut. Ismail Haniyeh, the Hamas leader that negotiated or was in the process of negotiating what would have been a second ceasefire, was killed in Tehran. And Hezbollah officials as well, who were involved in negotiations, were killed by the Israeli side. And so we have seen time and time again that Israel doesn't want negotiations. They don't want diplomacy to take place. That's because they believe that their advantage in the Middle East is on the path of war. Israel makes maximalist demands. They are doing things that no other country in the world would be allowed to do. They are expanding their borders and committing ethnic cleansing to do it. They are starving hundreds of thousands of Palestinians to death as we speak. And that's not even the action that Israel is doing that is receiving all this coverage. And, I do want to touch on the situation in Palestine before we wrap up here, but I don't want to get myself too sidetracked right away, and just kind of stay focused on this issue of Israel and their attacks on Iran and the American involvement in that. Now, the other thing about the U.S. providing intelligence, again, this is something that everybody assumed and probably knew, but when sources are coming out and making it official and it's being reported in the Western press, it's going to add to the pressure on Iran to not only respond to Israel, but also respond to the United States. So next up, I want to move to the next article that I wrote, and this gets into a little bit more of the U.S. and the Israeli involvement. And by the way, we are having a big audience build, over 800 people watching live so far. So really appreciate that everybody is tuning in. Again, if you're watching on X, just quickly hit the share button. If you want to leave a comment to interact some, head on over to the YouTube channel, subscribe, and drop that there. But this next article, an official said U.S.-Israeli deception gave Iran false security ahead of attack. I published this on the antiwar.com earlier today, and I write, a senior Israeli official told the Jerusalem Post that Tel Aviv and Washington worked together to convince Tehran that diplomacy was still possible after Israel was already planning and ready to attack Iran. Just hours before the Israel's massive assault began, President Trump maintained he was still committed to talks. The Israeli outlet reports the U.S. round of U.S.-Iranian nuclear negotiations scheduled for Sunday was part of a coordinated U.S.-Israeli deception aimed at lowering Iran's guard ahead of Friday's attack. And I just want to stop there and highlight what this is saying, what happened. That the U.S. knew Israel was going to attack Iran. And yet Trump sent a message on his True Social account, but directed at Iran, saying that we're still committed to diplomacy, still committed to the diplomatic path, when he knew that Israel was going to war before that happened. And so I think there's a really elaborate deception that played out here, where Iran thought they were just within 48 hours engaging in talks with the United States. Now, there were a lot of warnings, and people are highlighting this, that Israel was preparing for an attack. One of those warnings that people are pointing to was that the U.S. ordered a evacuation of some non-essential personnel from military bases and embassies in the Middle East. However, that evacuation notice went out, I think, less than 24 hours before the Israeli attack. And so, people really weren't able to make plans and to leave these facilities in that amount of time. And so I actually think that probably was a part of the false sense of security given to Iran. And also, it just goes to show how much Donald Trump loves Israel, that he wouldn't take the appropriate amount of time to make sure that everybody is evacuated from the Middle East, that Americans have plenty of notice to get the hell out of there, because he knew this attack was coming. He hammered out details with Netanyahu on this on their call for Monday. So Trump certainly knew that this was coming all week. Didn't say anything about it until 24 hours before, which means there's a hell of a lot more Americans in the Middle East now than otherwise needed to be. And this is just highly disturbing, again, of how much Trump is willing to jeopardize the safety of Americans and put Israel first, not put America first. Now, Chris, if we could go back to the article. So in a post on Truth Social shortly before the Israeli strikes, Trump declared that we remain committed to a diplomatic resolution to the Iran nuclear issue. My entire administration has been directed to negotiate with Iran. They could be a great country, but they first must give up hopes of obtaining a nuclear weapon. Thank you for your attention to this matter. But Brock Ravid from Axios later reported that Tel Aviv was given a clear green light to start the bombing, citing two unnamed Israeli officials. And the sources speaking with Axios said the perceived split between Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was coordinated behind the scenes. And this is the statement from Axios. Again, Brock Ravid, this is not somebody who's in any way a part of the independent media, very establishment, very committed to the Israeli narrative. He writes, two Israeli officials claimed to Axios that Trump and his aides were only pretending to oppose an Israeli attack in public and didn't express opposition in private. The goal, they said, was to convince Iran that no attack was imminent and to make sure Iranians on Israel's target list wouldn't move to new locations. And so, again, they made sure that this was going to happen in this way. And think about what this means for any other country that may engage in diplomacy with the United States, Russia, China, Venezuela, Cuba, right? If actually engaging with diplomacy with the US is just a massive deception, it's a massive play. Another thing that Trump has discussed today and posted on his True Social account is that the Israeli attack began exactly 61 days after Trump gave Iran a notice that they had 60 days to accept a nuclear deal with the US or face attack. Well, everybody knew from the very beginning that if Trump was serious, that there was only 60 days to make this deal, that it was never ever going to happen. There was so much political pressure in the United States of America against this deal. The Trump administration was flip-flopping the entire time in public. At times, Witkoff sounded completely reasonable, saying that Iran would be able to maintain the same level of nuclear enrichment that they did under the original 2015 Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, giving hope that something could happen. But then the United States switched their position. And so there was absolutely no hope that this could have gotten done in 60 days. And it makes me think that the whole thing was a ploy. Now, I can't prove that at this point. That's definitely some speculation, but really something to consider, that if Trump set a completely unreasonable objective that people really didn't even, I think, mark it on their calendars, that June 12th was the 60th day and Friday, June 13th was the 61st day. And that meant we should be on guard for an Israeli attack on Iran. But that is how it played out. And one has to wonder if the entire set of diplomatic negotiations between the US and Iran was nothing more than a ploy so Israel could quietly build up, receive shipment after shipment after shipment of weapons. I think I reported for the Libertarian Institute at one point that Israel, in a single weekend got 9 shipments full of these 2,000-pound bunker busting munitions from the United States. Now, that was going on while this diplomacy was happening. And maybe there would have been a lot more concern in Tehran about Israel receiving all these weapons had that diplomacy not been taking place. The Iranians thought that the diplomat process was moving in the right direction. After the fifth round of talks, they said the Americans took them seriously and that they made progress. And yeah, maybe Steve Witkoff was really just playing a role behind the scenes and really wasn't seriously committed in any way to diplomacy. This part of the story right here is just, I think, a massive issue. And it's something that is going to taint Donald Trump's legacy, but America's reputation around the world, and really cement into the minds of people that America cannot be considered a negotiation partner. And one more point on this. One of the there's nothing funny about this situation. We are, I think, on the precipice of a massive conflict in the Middle East that will see tens, if not hundreds of thousands of lives lost, people losing their homes, their jobs, displaced to third countries, living in refugee camps. This is going to be awful. This is going to be horrific. However, the internet is able to lighten up dark times with some dark humor. And former guest of this show, Daniel McAdams, posted a meme that had Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader, and he's sitting there with binoculars looking, and I guess he's looking at Iran, and he's saying, I told you you should have made nuclear weapons. And this will be the ultimate lesson from this, is that you have to have nuclear weapons to deter a U.S. regime change operation. Saddam Hussein gave up his nuclear weapons, was overthrown. Muammar Gaddafi gave up his nuclear weapons and he was overthrown. The Iranians thought they had split the difference, that they had developed a latent nuclear deterrent, which means they had mastered the enrichment cycle of uranium, that they could take their civilian nuclear energy program, which had always been a civilian nuclear energy program. The Ayatollah has a religious fatwa against developing weapons of mass destruction, including nuclear weapons. But they had what could one day become a nuclear weapons program with the technology they had inside in Iran, the same way that Japan, that Germany, that Brazil all do, solid US allies there. That was the way they're going to balance this, where they didn't want to have nuclear weapons. At the same time, they wanted to make sure that they didn't end up as a victim of a U.S. regime change operation. And so rather than developing nukes, they had this latent deterrent. And I think this makes it clear that that isn't good enough, that that's not enough to ward off the American empire. I saw Brad Pierce today, another former guest on this program, post on X that he said, look, this is really an argument in favor of the people, in favor of nuclear proliferation. Understanding that at this point in time, the way you prevent armies from crossing borders, from conflicts from escalating, like we saw in India and Pakistan, or the treatment that Russia gets versus other countries, China, is because of their nuclear weapons arsenal. And if Iran had a nuclear weapon, Israel would never attack. And that's a hard thing to argue with at this point in time. Now, we are just on the brink here of having over 2,000 people, a huge audience. Thank you all so much for sharing the show and helping to get out there to so many people. So before I move on to this next story, take the time to share the show. Again, we have a few people moving over and getting involved in the chat. So if you'd like to do that, head to the YouTube channel and subscribe to the show. Now, the next story I want to get to is how this day has developed. Iran strikes Israel and ends nuclear talks with the U.S. And really, this is the most major development today from yesterday, is that Iran has begun attacking back. And this is the statement from Iranian Supreme Leader, the Ayatollah, announcing that Tehran would retaliate to Israel's aggressive war. And this is his statement on Friday afternoon. The Zionist regime has made a big mistake, a grave error, and committed a reckless act. By God's grace, the consequences of this will bring that regime to ruin. The Iranian nation won't permit the blood of its valued martyrs to go unavenged, nor will it ignore the violation of its airspace. Tehran said some of its missiles were fired at Israel, even from a submarine. At this point, I believe there's been about 3 waves of Iranian missile or drone attacks at Israel. I'll get into and break that down a little bit more. I just want to note here that according to Pentagon, uh, Reuters Pentagon correspondent Idris Ali, 2 U.S. officials confirmed that American forces helped to shoot down Iranian missiles targeting Israel, and the U.S. had also deployed additional military assets to the region to help intercept the missiles. So, as being reported right now in the mainstream media, they're saying there's been 3 rounds of Iranian attacks on Israel. Now, I think in only 2 of those rounds of attacks have involved at least a significant number of ballistic missiles and have had missiles reach their target. Earlier in the day, there was a report of 100 Iranian drones, and it seems that most of them were shot down, and it didn't involve a very big missile presence. My guess is that Iran launched this drone attack with the intention of having missiles coming behind. Since drones fly a lot slower than the missiles, if you want the drones in the Israeli airspace at the same time the missiles get there, and this is how you beat air defense systems right now, is you overwhelm the radars, and you have the missile defenses get confused and end up taking out the drones, which move slower, typically have less of a payload than the actual missiles, who then have a clear path through to hit their target. And so my guess is Iran sent these 100 drones with the intention of sending missiles, and then either Israel interfered and destroyed some Iranian missiles, prevented that from happening. Maybe the Iranians weren't quite prepared and called off the attack for some reason. Or maybe this was like a trial balloon where Iran wanted to see where Israel's air defense systems were. And so once these missiles or these drones crossed into Israel, the air defenses activate, then they have an idea of where those systems are in preparation for later attacks. Either way, it does seem that it took a long time for Iran to really put up any kind of air defenses or any kind of response whatsoever. Later in the day, I did see Iranian air defenses active. There could be a few reasons behind this. One, apparently the Israeli attack was highly sophisticated and in some way resembled Operation Spiderweb that Ukraine recently carried out in Russia, where Israel and Mossad apparently placed a good amount of drones in Iranian territory that were used to not only disable Iranian missile defense and air defense systems, but also Iranian offensive missiles, which slowed up and made it take a lot longer for Iran to carry out a response attack. Additionally, the amount of assassinations of the Iranian, particularly, I believe, the IRGC Air Force Command or Aerospace Command, which was having a meeting that Israel attacked and took out a lot of the leadership of that particular branch of the IRGC at that time. And so those factors could have all slowed down the Iranian response. But it does now seem that Iran is not only fighting back, but also using their own missile defense systems. Reports, and I've seen videos that do seem to confirm that at least 1 Israeli jet was down by Iran, possibly 2, and that at least a IDF pilot was captured. There are some reports that that's a woman. I have no idea all the truth behind that at this point, but it does seem that at least 1 IDF jet was downed by Iran. Now, Iran's second and third wave of missiles fired at Israel do seem to have had some level of effectiveness. Trey Yangst, who is the Fox News foreign correspondent, who of Israel mainstream media foreign correspondents is probably the best one. He has tried to make a big deal of the amount of Palestinian journalists that Israel has killed in Gaza. So this guy isn't all bad. And he's on the streets of Tel Aviv and showing that the Israeli Ministry of Defense compound, the equivalent to the Israeli Pentagon, was hit, and a building nearby was hit by Iranian missiles. And a part of the reason there's not a lot of video coming out from Israel right now on this is because Israel is preventing this from coming out. The Israeli Ministry of Defense, and I believe this is propaganda, but they're telling their civilians, if you show where the Iranian missiles hit, it's going to help Tehran recalibrate their missile systems and be more effective in the future. And so they're not letting Fox film where these missiles hit, there are videos showing significant damage in Tel Aviv. Now, look, one street in Tel Aviv being on fire, a score of cars being destroyed, at least reports of one fatality, and certainly dozens of casualties among Israeli civilians so far have all been reported, is massive damage in Israel. It's nothing compared to what Israel has done to Gaza, the West Bank, and likely what Israel has done to Iran. But Israel has been punched in the face by these Iranian attacks, and there are videos that will be seen forever of Iranian missiles hitting dead center in Tel Aviv along the skyline. You can see the skyscrapers, and this missile comes screaming through the screen. And this has happened. I think the Iranians are saying dozens of missiles have hit their targets. I'm not sure I could go far enough to confirm that, but certainly a lot of Iranian missiles have hit their targets. Now, another piece to the Iranian response is not just attacking Israel, but also cutting off nuclear talks with the U.S. This is something else that I mentioned in that article, that Tehran canceled talks with Washington that were scheduled to take place on Sunday. And the interesting part of this that I want to note is earlier in the day, Trump urged Iran to still take a deal. He's saying Iran should surrender, that they should still go to Oman, engage in these talks. And you wonder, maybe this is just propaganda. Maybe this is just Trump saying that. But I wonder if he actually thinks that this is possible, that Iran is just going to capitulate, lay down their arms, and come to the table after their nuclear facilities have been hit. The chief of the IAEA, Rafael Grossi, this is the international watchdog that inspects nuclear weapons facilities, said there are some contamination and radioactive material leaking at the Natanz site, which is where Iran enriches their nuclear uranium. Now, I have seen reports from Israeli officials saying that Israel can't fully take out Iran's nuclear program. And so I think this is going to create a situation where Israel is now going to go to the Americans there and say, you have to help us finish this. And Tel Aviv is going to have a lot of support for this on Capitol Hill. If we could move to this next article, Chris. So I wrote this one for the Libertarian Institute today. It says large numbers in Congress back attack on Iran and call for the U.S. to support Israel. Now, some of these we talked about yesterday, such as Lindsey Graham saying that, game on, and disturbing remarks like that. And of course, John Fetterman's lethal, keep bombing them, Israel, you're winning, keep going, I'm so excited about this. But almost to a person, members of Congress are coming out for this. A lot of Republicans are giving this pray for Israel line. Imagine one country wreaks devastation and havoc on another. This is before the Iranian response, mind you, that Israel has not been bombed yet. Israel is doing the bombing. The people of Iran are dying. They're having their infrastructure destroyed, their homes blown up by Israel, by American bombs dropped by Israel. And Jody Ernst and Senator Britt, so many of these Republican senators and congressmen are saying, pray for Israel, pray for Israel. Why are we praying for Israel? Israel is destroying another country. We should be absolutely horrified by what Israel is doing. And we are just seeing this time and time again, where all these senators are coming out and saying, pray for Israel. But it really does. It's hard to believe. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse the more of these statements that I was reading of congressmen. This next one from Carlos A. Gimenez. He is a representative from Florida, saying, the threat from Iran will only stop when the regime is destroyed. Anything less is just a temporary respite from the existential threat Iran poses to our allies and to the free world. Imagine this. He's saying we have to have regime change in Iran. This is lunacy. This is insanity. Richie Torres, this is a Democrat who represents one of the New York City boroughs. The Islamic Republic of Iran is the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, providing substantial support to the proxies like Hamas, the perpetrators of October 7th massacre. Most alarming of all, Iran is a threshold nuclear power with the stated goal of wiping Israel off the map. Again, just not even basing their assessment in reality. They're saying that Iran is about to achieve a nuclear weapon. No, Iran wants to and has a civilian nuclear weapons program, not not a civilian energy program, not a nuclear weapons program. Just to be clear there. So we are seeing this time and time again from members of Congress. Now, I did want to take the time to highlight a couple of members of Congress who were right on this issue. Surprisingly, I think Jack Reed, who is a Democrat from Rhode Island, and Chris Murphy, who is a Democrat from Connecticut, both said that not only was this problematic in that we don't need to get dragged into another war in the Middle East, but if the establishment narrative is to be believed, where the US and Israel weren't working together behind the scenes this whole time, if Trump was actually serious about diplomacy, this absolutely blew up and ruined Trump's diplomacy, the Israeli strike on Iran, not the other way around. And of course, the best response from all this was uh, Thomas Massey, Republican from Kentucky. Trying to remember the state of Kentucky there. What Massey says, he called this an offensive war, which is exactly what it is. And it's very important to point that out because most of Washington's foreign policy is built around this idea that we can't let countries go to an offensive war. That this is why what Russia did in Ukraine is so awful, and yet this is exactly what Israel is doing in Iran. And it's so brave of Congressman Massey to call it out and just call it for what it is. Now, I do want to wrap up here. We do have an absolutely massive audience here. Almost 3,000 people are watching us live. So if you haven't already, share the show. We're going to have a little bit of fun with Germany on this last story. Chris, can we put up this tweet? This is what Germany said about the Israeli. This is what Germany said about Israel's strikes on Iran. Was put out before the Iranian response, before Iran hit Israel. Germany said, "We strongly condemn the indiscriminate Iranian attacks on Israeli territory. Iran's nuclear program violates the NPT and poses a threat to the entire region, especially to Israel." Now, I first saw this and I thought this has to be some kind of satire account. There's no way that Germany is watching Israel bombing all over Iran, killing scores of people, just hitting nuclear sites, right? Like, this is a massive environmental concern that they're blowing up nuclear sites in Iran, not to mention all the thousands of people that are said to be killed in the coming war between Tel Aviv and Tehran. And Germany looks at that and says, "We condemn Iran." Iran is the victim. They're being attacked. It's an offensive war by Israel. But then to go on and say Iran is in violation of the NPT, we have to worry about Iran's nuclear program. Iran isn't in violation of the NPT. Iran is a member of the NPT. It's Israel that has a nuclear weapons arsenal. It's Israel that isn't a party to the non-proliferation treaty. Remember, Israel, the only nuclear weapons test they did was with apartheid South Africa. This is not a country within the non-proliferation treaty. It's actually illegal for the US to even give Israel military assistance because of Israel's illegal nuclear weapons program. And yet, and this is something we pointed out, and this is where I'll bring it to a close here. Something we pointed out yesterday on our live stream last night with Connor Freeman was that if you ask the American people, who has a nuclear weapons program, Iran or Israel, they'll say Iran. who's the aggressor, Iran or Israel? They'll say Iran, when the complete opposite is true. And that's why, it's so important that so many of you took the time tonight and shared this stream so we could compete with the mainstream media and we could break this down in a way where we're getting to the truth and we're not focused on just framing everything within the lens that makes Tel Aviv look the best, because that's what so much of our media does, our Congress does. If you looked at the news this morning, who are they interviewing? They don't have on Jeffrey Stratz, John Mearsheimer, real military experts like Douglas McGregor or Daniel Davis. No, they're interviewing John Bolton, a man who's never saw a war he didn't like and who's drug America into stupid conflict after stupid conflict, who's part of the reason why we no longer have an Iran nuclear deal and this is even happening in the first place. He's a part of the reason why we don't have the INF treaty, the ABM treaty with Russia, and that Russia invaded Ukraine. This man is a warmonger who has created problems all over the world, and that's who the media brings on to tell you what's happening. John Fetterman and all 5 of his brain cells have gotten more interviews today than anybody who's actually qualified to talk about this subject. And so, again, we did hit over 3,000 people watching live, so I really appreciate all the support sharing out this show. I hope you're liking these live streams, these where I'm trying to kind of break down and respond to breaking news in a way where I'm not just speculating, I am breaking it down, trying to get to the truth, but at the same time, not going down the path of propaganda and just repeating what the mainstream media is saying. So thank you all so much for tuning in to today's special episode of the Kyle Lanzalone Show. We may be back with another episode this weekend. If not, we'll definitely be back by Monday at our regular time, 4:45 Eastern. But if we do have more breaking news, if we do want to deliver you a really special report, you will want to be subscribed to the YouTube channel, because that's the best way that you're going to be notified of that content. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Back with another episode soon.